Hello quilters! In this video I'm going to show you how I bind these little bitty Christmas ornament quilts that we've been working on. So I have my quilt all trimmed and ready to go, and I've prepared my piece of binding. I had cut it and then cut a diagonal on it and folded that over a bit and then fold it in half, and I'm ready to go. Now because these are so little, it's a little bit different than what I'm basically using the same process, but you have to play with this tininess of it a bit. So I'm going to start with laying my binding right along the edge of my little quilt, but I'm not going to start up here at the top because I want to have room to be able to finish it off when I come around. So I'm actually going to start down here, and it's just going to be a few little stitches I take before I stop to do the miter in the corner. I like to put my bindings on still with my walking foot. I find that works pretty well. And for these little ones, normally when I do a binding, I do it at my 1/4 inch mark. These I'm doing between my 1/4 inch and this edge over here is 1/8 of an inch. So I'm kind of in between those two. And you can see the edge here. I'm not going to take very many stitches before I stop because I want to stop that same distance that I'm doing sewing here. I want to stop that same distance from the edge. And one of the things that I use that can help me see the edge is I have this little, it's called the purple thing, little stiletto here, and you can see when I press it down I know that the edge is right there, and that just kind of helps me know where to stop. So I'm going to take a few little tiny stitches here just to get started and lock it in place. Then I'll stitch down. I'm going to go really slow here because I want to make sure I stop in the right place. So you can see right now I've got about that much, and I know that's too far, so I'm going to take another stitch. And I'm just kind of going to eyeball that. That's looking pretty close to where I want it to be. This actually though, this is my 1/4 inch mark, so I think I might take one more stitch. Okay, and then I'm going to back stitch gotta sit back from my machine here a minute to find my button, and back stitch a bit just to lock those stitches in place. So, you know, I didn't take very many stitches before stopping here because this is just a mini tiny little quilt. Okay, so I'm going to trim off these threads. I'm going to go ahead and trim off these other little fraying threads there too. Trim off these other bits too, just to get them out of the way. Okay, let's make sure I have this where you can see what I do. So I take the binding that I have and I flip it up over the top, so I have this nice angle here. And then I bring it back down. I bring it back down across my quilt, and the fold I want to be even with this edge, but now I'm all nice and straight, so I'll stick it back underneath my needle here. And get it all lined up. I'm having to work around my camera, so it can be a little tricky for me to see what I'm doing here at first. Okay, and I'm going to start with my tiny stitches. Take just, 5 or 6 of them, and then my regular stitch length. Now down. And again, I'm coming down to that corner, and I'm going to do the same thing that I did before, kind of watching to see where I want to stop. I want to stop. My machine and I do not always work on the same page, it seems. Okay, I want to back stitch just to lock those in place a bit. And I'll show you one more time how to do those corners. So move it up here where you can see. So flip it up so you have that nice 45 angle there, and then bring it back down to where the fold is even with the top edge, and my edges here are nice and good. And then I'm going to continue sewing around that way until I get back to the side that I started on, and I'll join you there in just a minute. Well, I'm back to the side that I started with. You can see where my starting point was here. So I'm again going to do the same thing. I'm going to fold up. Don't know if I can get it where you can see. I'm going to fold up and fold down, but I don't want to sew over this right now, and so I'm just going to take just a few little tiny stitches to hold this in place for me and call it good on this side for now. So once again, I'm going to stick it underneath my needle, and I'm going to do those tiny little stitches, and then I'm just going to take let's see, not very many, like 3 or 4 stitches down here. Okay, I did 5, and I'm going to back stitch. I just basically want to hold that little part in place so I don't have to deal with it while I'm finishing off the binding here. Okay, so now I have all that in place and ready to go. So what I'm going to do is, I've got my starting position here. I'm going to look at this section right down here, this point. I'm going to lay my binding on it, and then I want to go about a ½ an inch beyond it, and I'm just going to take my scissors and clip off my binding at that point. There we are. Then I'm going to open up this little bit of binding here, and sometimes the stiletto can help you in this process too. I'm just going to tuck that into the fold of my binding. And get it to lay nicely here into the tuck. Sometimes you'll have to wiggle a bit to get it to do what you want it to do. Looks like it's starting to lay in there nicely. Okay, and when I'm satisfied with how that's sitting in there, then I'm just going to start up here at the top of this side of the binding and take my little stitch to start with and switch to my regular stitch and stitch down across the side here. Now I want to be careful that I don't catch this, and I can kind of see where I think you can see where my stitches started there, so that's kind of what I'm shooting for. Alright, now I'm going to finish that off with a few back stitches. And there, we've sewn the top of the binding on now. Trim off my threads. Let's get them out of the way. Okay, so there's our nice little mitered binding. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take it over to my ironing board, and I'm actually going to press along these edges so that it lays much nicer on the top. But as you can see, we've got our binding nicely attached with our mitered corners on the edges. So I'm going to go press that and then show you how I finish it off. Now I have my little quilt all pressed. I pressed the binding around, so now I'm going to flip it over so I can work on fastening the binding to the back side. Now pressing it that way just helps it to lay in place a little bit better. Okay, I think I'll start. It doesn't matter where I start really. So I'm going to fold this binding over and see how it covers up the stitching we did from the top side. That's what I'm looking for. And then these corners, I'm going to miter those as well. So I'm folding it like so, and then I'm just going to bring this down right there, and then I have a nice miter. See if I can bring it up for you to see a little better here. nice miter in the corner. One of the things you can do is put a little clip to just kind of hold things in place while you're working. That's totally optional. I sometimes use them, especially on larger quilts, to hold the binding in place, but it's just a nice little trick. Alright, so I've got my length of thread here, and I've got a knot on one end, and to start, I'm just going to run my needle between the layers of my binding here and pop up like that. And then I'm going to fold this over, and I'm just going to do a simple little slip stitch along the edge here. So I go down just right next to where I came up in the binding, and then pop up on the edge of the binding. Just want to catch the fold there a bit, and I'll just continue working my way around. Let's see if I turn my camera angle. Maybe we can get it so you actually see me working right side up. Are you dizzy yet? How about that? So down where I popped up with the needle, pull that. Just trying to catch just a little bit of the fold of the binding. That will hold it nicely in place. Any threads that are popping out, I tuck back in. And then as I'm coming up to that corner, let me just clip out of the way so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to just go ahead and take some stitches right there and fold my binding over. This is the tricky part. I think I want to put a little more angle in it here. And I'm going to go down like I have been doing, and this time pop up so that I go through that folded miter. And I like to take a little extra stitch just right in the corner there. Kind of act as a little extra secure feature. Okay, and then I'm going to proceed around the next side and all the way around my little mini quilt here. Alright, so I hope that this video series has helped you see how I do the process for working with these little tiny quilts, and that you'll be willing to give them a try and let me know how it goes. So until next time, happy quilting!